Okay, welcome to Stitch Happens. Today's episode is number 5, and today's topic is culture. So, what is culture? Culture is a collection of learned behaviors, values, and beliefs that define a group of people. It includes the way people think, act, and communicate, as well as material objects that they create, like tools and clothing. Culture is not innate, but is passed down from through generation, shaping how people feel and also behave. So, Dr. Dori, from your experience, what do you think culture's impact is on people, society, and the world, past, present, and future? And what does the word preservation mean in those segments of time? So, also, please introduce yourself.
All right. Hello, I am Dr. Dori Tunstall. I am a design anthropologist, former dean of faculty design at OCAT University, and right now I am the founder of Dori Tunstall Inc., a firm that focuses on building respectful relationships with cultural communities through decolonization and the other dread word, diversity. I still do diversity, equity, and inclusion. Um, yeah, and I'm just happy to be in conversation with you, Emiko. I've been looking forward to this for a long
Thank,
time. So,
thank you. And thank you for being here. It's a blessing to have Dr. Dori here
mm,
today. We've been around the moon a couple of times. So it's been a blessing since the first time that I met you. So thank you.
yeah. So you provided a really great textbook definition of culture. I tend to talk about it in as really just like the values that we choose to pass
Mhm.
along to future generations.
Right.
And then these are the things we make, the things we say, the things that we create are all the ways that we make sure that those values have a form that allows it to move through the generations. Um,
Nice.
so that's culture for me.
Yes, yes. So then what do you think about the culture's impact on people, society, and the world, past, present, and future? Do you think that is different? Like culture has had a stronger influence in the past or the present, or even what is the future cultural influence?
No, again, like culture is what we make through living. So it's to describe it in terms of its impact, again, it is what it is in the sense that it is how we make meaning in the world. It is how we carry on through the world. So it's a thing where, to talk about it as impactful is as if culture is something here and then people are something here, but actually people create culture. And
Beautiful.
we do it in different ways. One of my favorite anthropologists is a Cuban anthropologist in the 1940s called Fernando Ortiz. And he talks
Mhm.
about this process of transculturation, where he says in each generation, three processes happen. There's acculturation, where
Mhm.
you take upon aspects of another culture. There's
Mhm.
deculturation, in which you can lose aspect of your cultures or refuse aspect of cultures. And then there's neoculturation, where through cultural encounter, you completely develop something new. And
Wow.
I love to think about culture in that way because it means each generation has to go through the process of making that decision. What are we going to keep? What are we
Right.
going to get rid of? And then what is it that we're creating new? And again, the other part of the way in which he talks about it is so powerful is that he says, and these processes happen under unequal power relations. So sometimes you have to let go of culture because someone is forcing you to, or you
Mhm.
have to take on culture because someone is forcing you to. So I
Mhm.
love the fact that he doesn't separate this notion of culture as like the values we want to pass on in future generations from like power structures that decide in some ways what you can keep and not keep and what is there to be able to create new.
That is true. And that goes to preservation, which was the last part of that question. Like,
Yeah.
and how does preservation speak to each part of each of those time stages or time frames?
Well, again, it's a thing. Preservation is about deciding what it is that we want to keep from the past, right?
Mhm. Right.
And sometimes we can continue the same form. We're trying to give it the same form again and again and again. And they talk about, let's say, for example, in Japan, there's these temples, which if you walk, like thousands of year old temples, which if you go to them, they look the same as they did 1,000 years ago, is because as part of their cultural preservation, they repair and maintain it using as much as possible the same techniques, the same processes, the same colors as they did before in the past, right? So that's
Yeah.
one form of preservation, but sometimes you preserve it in new and different forms, right? And so I think of like, especially in the processes where, again, your culture has been made forbidden for one reason or another. Again, those forms continue, right? You preserve those practices, but you may give them a different form. So again, we talk about in African American culture, instead of playing to the Orishas, you give them a new form in terms of the Catholic saints. Again, still being able to do the practice. In order to preserve the cultural practice, you have to give it a new form, right?
Well, preservation, and I think that's so important, especially to the next generations and to the future. But to your point, there's just so many beautiful nuances of how culture ties back into our daily life for generations and back all the way back to our ancestors, and it speaks to the language and everything that we have and everything that we have done. So, Dr. Dori, so just changing a bit to innovation disruptions would be the next little step that I want to take. And the reason why I wanted to talk about innovation disruptions is because I remember reading the book Cradle to Cradle, and I should have it in my hand. Let me go grab it right quick because I have to talk about it. Hold on one second. That would be a little 2-minute break for me to adjust and have the book.
Yeah, no worries.
So now I'm changing gears over into innovation disruptions. And the reason why I wanted to speak to innovation disruptions, and I know that you can't really see the book too well, but
yeah, I kind of hold it in front of your flash that way. So I said that you got it free. There we go.
So I remember receiving this book in grad school, and I went to Pratt Institute in Manhattan. And so in grad school, of course, we had to do a lot of research, we had to do a lot of case studies. But finding this book by Michael Braggart and also William McDonald, reading it for the first time from a designer standpoint, I was blown away because it makes designers speak a different language and also learn a different system of. And so they propose a circular system where products are designed to be used, recycled, and returned to the production cycle, which equals zero waste. This process will reduce harmful environmental impacts along with overproduction and overconsumption. And so I feel like as designers, whenever we start thinking about life cycle impacts, like what are those materials that we are actually creating that product out of, and can we start to make maybe have biodegradable materials at the very beginning of the process? Maybe they're recycled, but what are those things that we can start to think about at the very beginning of the process so that by the end use of the product, it doesn't end up sitting in a landfill? So I think for me is finding out how to design in a better way, how to make better systems, how to make circular systems. So then how do you create a product that even though it might have waste, that waste goes back into itself? So that's the same as nature. I love this quote, "There is no waste in nature. Everything is a resource," by L. Hunter Lovins. And so I think for me, again, with this book, Cradle to Cradle, how do designers end up making sure that, yes, we can make pretty things, but instead of making pretty things that sit in landfills, how do we make a shirt out of cotton, out of seeds? And then by the time that consumer or that user end up deciding to throw that product away or in the landfill, it ended up blooming into a plant. So then that way you have more of a circular system that goes back into nature. You have some materials that are biodegradable that are able to break down. And then we're also being cautious and cognizant on carbon emissions, because the materials that we use have carbon emissions that actually are not good for the earth. So how are we also impacting climate change at the same time? So going back to innovation disruptions, the reason why I brought up the book was because I wanted to be able to start talking about circular systems, circularly designed processes that we would be able to then adapt into culture. So my question to you, Dr. Dori, is how do we as a culture help to innovate in new ways and systems that will enrich, regenerate, and sustain communities, environments, especially in underprivileged and underserved populations?
Okay. So there's a lot to unpack there.
Yes.
I will take your cradle to cradle and raise you one book called
Yes.
Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Waller Kilmerer.
Okay.
And in this book, so Robin Waller Kilmerer is a Potawatomi of the Potawatomi Nation, a citizen of the Potawatomi Nations, one of the um, Native American tribes here in lands referred to as the United States. And in Braiding Sweetgrass, she talks about from an indigenous perspective, rethinking our relationship to nature. And particularly, she's trained in botany, biology, so she actually very specifically about plants. And what does it mean to think of plants as to engage with them in a sense of kinship and with a sense of obligation to care for them.
Okay.
So and I think, even in the example that you were giving in terms of like placing seeds in a fabric material that when it goes to waste, produce another thing like that, why I was sort of like thinking beyond cradle to cradle and thinking more of braiding sweet grass is that like, again, if you're deeply connected to the ideal of plant and place, the ideal of, let's say, this seeded cotton shirt, we know that most of the waste ends up in places like Chile in the desert or on the coast of Africa, right, in Ghana or places like that. So if that seed is not a native to that place where this waste is going, then all of a sudden you may have caused another ecological disaster because that seed may then, and this is what's happened, right? In a process of colonization, people brought seeds that were not native to the land and the place where they were planted. And this is why, again, I'm here in Los Angeles and we've had these horrific fires. And we've had these horrific fires. Again, the land that they're on are fire lands. Indigenous people, again, did control burning, took care of the land so that you didn't have these kinds of disasters, right? In the way where you have, 36 people or so dead,
Wow.
over 6,000 homes destroyed, right?
Wow.
But why the fire was so devastating is that around all of these different homes were plants that were not native to the land and the climate that they were in. So that's just to say, like, I'm like, cradle to cradle is great. But again, you wouldn't need cradle to cradle if you had a deeper relationship with place, a deeper relationship with all the materials, right, that you use in a place. And then the care that you understand when, again, that plant that, let's say, for example, was put in that seed, it had its own life to live in a place that was better than where it may end up because some person, again, thinking I'm a consumer, I've done a really good job of recycling. The designer did a really good job of like making it easier to break down in 80 years as opposed to 500 years. But that's
Correct.
still, if that ends up in the wrong place, then again, it's not solving the problem of sustainability. It's just offshoring it to create another ecological disaster somewhere else.
That is true.
So I believe deeply in circular design,
Yes.
right? But it's a thing where like, but I also believe we have to go deeper so that, again, if you have a relationship to the materiality of the things that you make, you would not put things that are poisons into the earth. You
Right.
would not put things that, again, would cause harm to another community because you're not taking in consideration where your global products might be going, right?
Right.
And knowledge of the thing I'm just trying to say is that, again, circular cradle to cradle is a great step away from the clear disaster of design. You
Correct.
know, since the 1960s and 70s, when we decided that plastic was the best thing to put back in the earth.
Correct.
Um, but we have to move beyond that thinking and really, again, understand what our relationship is to the land and our relationship to all of the plants and the minerals of the land, and come to them with a sense of care, that I have
Yes.
an obligation to care,
Yes.
not a right to take, but an obligation to care. And
Correct.
that is actually what is going to, again, create new innovations.
Yes.
And then I guess the last part that I hit on, because you sort of talked about disruption, and you were talking about again how it affects what I call, again, structurally marginalized or structurally overexploited communities, is that I was part of this group called the Culture Space Innovation Group, and uh, came out of kind of coming together. I was living in Australia, so in 2011, we brought
Nice.
together Indigenous and sort of, you know, anthropologists and activists and designers and innovation consultants, and we all went to like Bellagio, Italy,
Nice.
with the Rockefeller Foundation, and we
Nice.
came up with this notion of like cultures-based innovation to
Okay.
push back on this sense of disruption, you know, because for as colonized people,
Mm-hmm.
we've had enough of disruption, right? Disruption
Mm-hmm.
means, in some ways, not being able to practice our culture. Disruption has meant not having access to our land.
Correct.
So we're not really interested in disruption in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
And innovation is talked about as like, again, something new, right?
Right.
Which again is normally in it, our histories have been the newness, the coercion of the newness has been part of our oppressions, right? In terms of being able to practice our cultures. So we talked about supporting innovations based on tangible and intangible cultural heritage, in which the
Mm-hmm.
communities are the direct beneficiaries and sources of their own innovations.
Nice.
In other words, like what we're interested in is how do we use tangible and intangible cultural heritage to drive irreversible changes in people's attitudes, behaviors, and values that
Nice.
directly benefit Indigenous, minority, and migrant communities under social and environmental distress. That's what it means to be in the ecological situation that we are in now, right? Is that every one of us are living under social and environmental distress.
Right. And what you just spoke about goes back to preservation. Like everything that you just talked about, like, and again, I feel like it's almost like our ancestors speaking to us and through us in our DNA, and how to preserve planet Earth. How do we have less plastic use, especially the plastic that ends up in the oceans that end up
Mhm.
with the sea life, that they should never even be impacted by our plastic, but they're being impacted by our waste. But then how do we have a newer version of an industrial revolution? How do we do better? How do we create a better of, to make a better planet, people, and also to have profit at the end of the day? So I think preservation, again, we talked about it at the very beginning of the conversation. So then how does preservation now speak back to everything that what you were just speaking to?
Well, again, the issue of preservation is who gets to preserve, right?
Yeah.
And so in that sense, again, newness sometimes operates coercively against preservation.
Mm.
And the assumption that you have to have when you're like, oh, I want to do something new is that there's something inherently not worthy of that which was old.
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And again, and that I think is like I see that as a very European mentality where, out of the horror that was feudalism, right? Where you had kings who could tell you to do anything they want, right? Take all your land. Again, a horrible, horrible system that in wanting to escape from that system, they decided we don't want our traditions anymore because those
Mm-hmm.
traditions upheld oppression.
Right.
If you come from a culture where your culture upheld love and community and mutual support and all these things, you don't want to get rid of that culture, right?
Right. That is true.
So, so again, I go back to the sense of, you say it has to be profit driven. Okay. You had profit is a form of hoarding,
Mm-hmm.
right? And again, it was kings who hoarded.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so again, we've had so many other systems that says the way to create harmony, the way to create wealth, the way to create mutual understanding is by letting things flow,
Mm-hmm.
redistribution, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's fine to make money.
Right.
It's fine to be able to pay your workers. It's
Right.
fine to be able to pay a fair price
Mm-hmm.
for the materials that you use and the people who are gathering those materials for you. Um, Money is just a way to allow ideas and things to flow between people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Profit for me is not a goal
Right.
to the extent to which it's about hoarding and
Mm-hmm.
and and in our capitalist system it's about hoarding it for your stakeholders,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which means you're not fair to your workers always. You're not fair to the people who are providing the materials that you're gathering. You're not fair to the materials themselves, right? So maybe it's a thing where like where, and then again, it's like, where do designers all fit within this, right? I know that's
Right.
your question. And again, it's a thing where designers make real the values that we hold as society. What Cradle to Cradle is saying, yeah, we need to have better values.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying as designers, again, what is it that you're making? Are you making poisons?
Right.
Right? Are
Right.
you making things that in the pipeline are going to be extractive and exploitative to other people?
Right.
And I this is the thing that I just posted this on my Substack the other day, where it's like the root of all evil is allowing your discomfort to be greater than someone else's life,
Mm. Wow.
right?
Wow. Wow.
So it's like, okay, I'm not going to be able to buy the next high-end phone.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but actually, I don't care about that, even though I know that there are children in the Congo who are dying so that
Mm-hmm.
they can get cobalt to go into that phone.
Right. Wow. Wow.
So my thing is that cradle to cradle doesn't take it deeper enough. Braiding sweetgrass, again, it's about reorienting again your whole value system around what it is that you're making and its impact on the others and its impact on the environment, um, which makes you question what kind of person am I as a maker in this world?
Correct.
What are the things that I'm making? And am I choosing my comfort over someone else's life?
Correct. That is very true. That is very true. And I just want to bring this quote in. What if humans design products and systems that celebrate an abundance of human creativity, culture, and productivity? And that is by Michael Braggett, which is by Cradle to Cradle. And I know, love the book that, yes, you said it's braiding. What is it?
So the book is Braiding Sweetgrass.
That is beautiful. It's a beautiful cover too.
Mm-hmm.
Braiding Sweetgrass. And the reason why I wanted to bring that quote in is because whenever I think about circular systems or even circular design, I immediately start thinking, my first example is like urban gardens, right? Rooftop gardens. How do you create a space in normal circumstances on an asphalt jungle? You wouldn't necessarily have greens coming through. But then if you create a space on the roof, which might be limited, but at the same time, you're also bringing that community together, and you're creating a space where, to your point earlier, it's not necessarily all about profit, but it is about those resources and sharing those resources to have a better system that works within ecosystems, and especially for underprivileged or underserved communities. So I thought that was an amazing quote. So I know that you just talked about the book Sweetgrass. Is there any other quotes or any other books? And wait, did I say the book wrong? I'm sorry. I said
It's
Sweetgrass.
Braiding Sweetgrass.
Braiding Sweetgrass. Let me get it correct. Braiding Sweetgrass. Is there any other quotes or any other books that you would recommend?
I mean, there's thousands. I mean, I guess my thing is like, and I'm not doing this to be cheeky. I'm doing this like, again, with genuine sense of thing. It's like, and writing Decolonizing Design, the book, I was very careful about what I put in the bibliography.
Okay.
And again, a lot of the things that I read, a lot of the things that I believe in are like all here listed.
Nice.
Right, in terms of things that people can read. But again, it's a thing where it's not just about reading. Like there are beautiful podcasts that talk about this work. There are beautiful, like I said, I'm on Substack and I'm on
yeah, share with the audience what your loves are. Yeah, your favorites as far as resources then.
Again, what works for me isn't necessarily going to work for other people. And again, I'm a firm believer is if people are interested, then, Google is a wonderful tool.
That is
true. Or I say, go.go or whatever is the other alternative if you don't want to use Google is really very important for you to educate yourself and to find the things that resonate with you. The things that resonate with me. And again, yes, I could share that in the sense of like, yes, you may not know about this and you might want to learn it, but I'm also kind of in that space where it's like, there is so much out there. If you want to know that, it's kind of like, I would rather you do that extra step of labor of figuring it out for yourself. Right.
Yes. Yes.
And that might be, again, like we're the Black women space that we're in right now, where it's like, resting is resistance. I don't want to put in that extra labor. Thank you very much. I'm resting now and drinking my tea and, growing vegetables in the community garden and, reconnecting on learning how to sew well so that I can sew clothes and things like that, because that's, like we had all of 2020 for people to be educated.
That is true. That is very true. That is very true. Yes. Yes. So, Dr. Dori, has always been amazing conversations with you, and I'm glad that we were able to finally sit down and have this conversation and discussion around culture, preservation, our ancestors, circular systems, circular design, and how do we make better. So I thank you, Dr. Dori, for gracing me with your presence and allow me to spend time with you today. And this is episode number 5. And I thank you, Dr. Dori. And any last questions or comments that you would like to say to the future generations of innovators, makers, and creators that might be listening or might be tuning in to the episode.
Yeah, just to sort of say, when you're in the process of making, I love the concept, the indigenous concept of all my relations.
Beautiful.
And to me, it comes from like a Anishinaabe sort of way of living a good life.
Okay.
But really just, again, as you're making something, think of every tree, think of water, um, think of all the materials that are going in there as a cousin, or if it's closer to you, like a sibling.
Yes.
Because if you, and again, we're assuming that these relations that you have with humans are full of love and support and obligations of care, right?
Yes.
But if you extend that same obligation of care to your plant relatives, your mineral relatives, your animal relatives, your air and water relatives, then I
Yes.
think you will design better things because it'll
Yes.
be better for all of us, right?
Correct. Correct. And that just made me think about designing with empathy. Like the first time that I heard that, I was like, whoa, what is that? But that is designing from not necessarily your standpoint, but you're designing from an empathetic standpoint of, to your point, what does nature feel? What is the water? What is the air? What is the solutions? What is the chemicals in this material or in this product that I'm now making? And it might be beautiful. Again, that's what I said earlier, but once it actually the user use it in life and then it sits in the landfill for the next 8,000 years, is that successful, or is it going and connecting back to nature and having that zero waste to where you have more of an abundance, and also you are reconnecting back to the life cycle which we are all created and connected to? So I think that is just being empathetic from a designer standpoint. So I love what you just said. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, and the beautiful thing is that if you go to things with a sense of an obligation to care, you don't
Yes,
need empathy,
that is
right?
true.
It's like if
That is
I feel like I have an obligation to care, I don't need to know what the what the trees are feeling
that
if
is
I
true.
understand that my role is
Yes.
obligated to care for these trees, right? So again,
Yes.
empathy opens up the possibility of you for
Mhm.
caring,
Yes.
but you actually want to get to the point where it doesn't matter if you understand them or not. You feel
Yes.
obligated to care.
That makes your responsibility even stronger. So that is beautiful. Yes. So thank you, Dr. Dory, for being with me here on episode number 5. And thank you again for coming in and stopping by and talking to the audience. This is
Mm.
Stitch Happens.